And it just doesn't have to be that way. That's where I get hung up. Like, it does not have to be. We are making it that way. We are causing it to be that way. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Move Podcast, motivating others virtually every day. I have a hot topic in store today. I was sent something yesterday, and upon reading it and looking more into it, I was like, yeah, I'm going to cover this. It's a problem that we have in this country specifically. I've mentioned a few different times, how corrupt our public education system is. This is just yet another example of what I'm referencing when I'm saying this stuff. So without further ado, let's dive into this. So as of right now, these are allegations. Okay. These are not. Now, I do believe, based on what I could find, is, they are going to take this to the Department of Justice and the Department of Education, which, whatever, the Department of Education is worthless anyways. But hopefully the Department of the DOJ will get this thing figured out and get it ironed out and get it corrected. So anyways, so there's been a lot of reports coming out of a small town in Kansas, which is another example of, when you live, I came from a small town, and when you live in a small town and issues come out, a lot of people around you will try to make it seem like, well, that only happens in big cities, or that only happens in California, and so when you see things like this is a small town in Kansas, Eureka, Kansas. The town of, I don't even know, maybe 1,200 people, 1,500. It's a small town. Okay, it's very small. And so this is just an example of, if it's happening there, it's probably happening in a lot of other places, right? So they had a project called Find Your Voice. Okay, so the whole point of this topic was to try to have students voice who their idol was, explain why, blah, blah, blah. That was kind of the point of the project. So they got into this. This is a 6th grade class, by the way. So the 6th grade class did this project, and one of the students said his idol was Charlie Kirk. The teacher that was heading this project said that she became extremely uncomfortable and demanded that name not be used, and that she said that Charlie Kirk is not a hero. Moving along, another kid said President Donald Trump. She became visibly more angry and put her foot down and said, no political figures, no religious figures. Okay, so a project called Find Your Voice turned into a project of silencing certain voices that don't fit certain agendas. Let's take it a step further, because we're not done. Because that in itself is a major issue that we're going to get into just a little bit. They followed it up with saying, "Don't go home and tell your parents what's going on here. None of what's being discussed right now needs to go home and be discussed at home. Okay, this stuff stays at school." Well, obviously, kids went home and told their parents, and rightfully so. Parents became very upset and started making phone calls like, "Hey, what's going on? What's this? What's this?" And the school released an apology. The principal released an apology. And then she held a meeting with the 6th grade class that did the project. And in that meeting, she said, in the future, if you have any school-related issues, let's go to a school member, let's not go home and tell our parents. So once again, there's that separation of don't tell your parents what's going on at school, blah blah blah. What an atrocity to have at a public school system that is supposed to be shaping the future generations of this nation. What an absolute atrocity. And I hope each and every one of you involved is held to the highest extent of the law that is allowed, because this is complete garbage. Because here's the way I feel. If your hero is Joe Biden, good for you. If your hero is Donald Trump, good for you. Like, who am I to tell you who you should and shouldn't like? Now, if you say your hero is BTK, that's a whole different conversation. If you say your hero is Osama bin Laden, that's a whole different conversation, right? That's a massive difference. But when you're talking about American leaders, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, who are you to say a kid can't follow that? Like, as a school system, who are you to make that decision for them? You know, the reason behind it, they say, was they didn't want other students to feel a type of way about those names and then create an unsafe environment for the kids. I'm flabbergasted. What are you talking about? They're at school. That's the place where you teach them how to agree to disagree. How you teach them that even if you don't agree with somebody, how to have a civil conversation regardless. That's the perfect place to be teaching our younger kids, the future generations, how to have a completely different opinion than somebody else and keep it cordial. But instead, we remove that and only allow this. It's sickening. That's a sickening article that I read. Those allegations are bad. Those are bad. And again, we're talking about a tiny town. So this isn't some California thing. This isn't a New York City thing. This is in the heart of the United States in a small town, and we're still pushing an agenda in a public school. That's one of the biggest reason why we pulled our son out of a public school, is you are not going to push a political agenda on my kid. I'm not going to have it. I want him educated. Okay. I don't need anybody to push an agenda on him. I don't need anybody to be having these weird conversations that don't need to be had with him at his age. Back to my original conversation about this school. So that's the reports. Those are the allegations. And the other piece that you have to this is they instructed the kids not to go home and tell their parents. Don't go home and tell your parents we're having these conversations. Don't go home and tell your parents that we told you guys this today. Then when they go home and tell their parents, then they get ridiculed, because then you came back and said, hey, in the future, when we have issues like this at school, let's keep this at the school. We don't need to go home and tell your parents. Like, they keep trying to cut the parents out of the picture. They want to control the whole narrative, the whole conversation, and exclude all parents. You know, that's not a public education system. They're indoctrinating your kids. That's what that is. It's indoctrination. 100%. Our public education system is so broken in this country for multiple reasons. I mean, you have political agendas, which that there is a prime example of an agenda being pushed, where you're silencing certain voices and allowing others to speak. And then you have essays going on in these public schools often. And you know, those things happen and that same town had that same situation. Maybe that town's just corrupt, but I'm not going to get into that. We have a serious essay problem. I mean, I keep saying it. The state of California's public education system is literally on the brink of going completely under, because they have over, what is it, $3 or $4 billion in essay lawsuits against their state, because they opened it up where, you know, even if you were assaulted 20 years ago, you could come forward and press charges. And ever since they opened that up, We live in a time where people feel okay. Back in the 90s, early 2000s, when you were assaulted like that in that manner, that was embarrassing. Which I'm sure it still is, but people feel a lot more comfortable saying, you know what, this isn't right. I'm reporting this. We're gonna go through with this. Blah blah blah. We live in a time where that happens more often than what it used to. The same thing with Bill Cosby. The same thing. Somebody finally got the courage to stand up and say, "Hey, this is what happened." Blah blah blah. And then there was a whole slew of women that came forward. Some probably did it for the publicity. Others were probably legit, right? Anytime you get a star like a Bill Cosby and something like that's going on, like people are also just gonna throw their name in the hat, right? But I think without a shadow of a doubt, most of those allegations were probably pretty accurate. So we have that going on in schools. And then on top of all of that, their curriculum is complete garbage. They don't even teach your kids what they need to know to survive in this country, to survive in this world. Like, they are literally not teaching our kids what they need to know for the real world. I don't even know who came up with the curriculum. I try to think back, like, obviously when I went to school, I think back what they taught, and I'm like, I don't even know at a time or place where that curriculum would have served somebody well. I don't really even know where it came from. I don't know who wrote this curriculum, thought this curriculum was a good idea, but the curriculum is complete trash, complete garbage. We don't teach our kids about investing in the stock market and the importance of knowing how to invest and the difference between investing versus a savings account and the different types of accounts that you can have and the interest rates that they can draw. And we don't teach them about the housing market, interest rates, and mortgages, and entrepreneurship, and tax write-offs and tax breaks. And we don't teach any of this stuff. That's a problem. So who are we raising? What are we raising? How are we shaping future generations? That doesn't make any sense to me. Why would you be teaching all this other garbage? Like, algebra is a prime example. A complete garbage. Get rid of it. Now, I'm sure, I don't even know of one, but I'm sure there is a career field where algebra is used. Let them do the algebra. Why do I need to know? I've literally used algebra 0 times in my entire life. Chemistry, 0 times. Okay, like, there are some classes that were required that have served me no purpose in my entire life, and probably never will. But there are several things that I've had to go learn in my adult life that was not taught when I was growing up. And that's a problem. Now, not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. That's fair. But I think everybody should at least understand the basic fundamentals and the basic principles of what does it take to start your own company. At least you have the knowledge of what it takes, right? There are certain classes that are taught that are extremely important, like keyboard, typing. Like, that's an extremely important class, especially with all the technology we have. It's very important you know how to type. Now with all these technologies and stuff, you can just do voice to text and whatnot. But still, to me, in my opinion, it is very important you know how to type, right? I think history should be like a 1-year class, and then you're done with it. We can talk about the wars, American history, and blah, blah, blah. You can just wrap it all into one, because at the end of the day, it's important to understand history and know where it came from, but it's not as important as economics and learning exactly how those things operate, right? Now, when I was in school, they would very lightly brush over stock market. Like, you knew what it was, but you didn't know how it worked. You didn't know the ins and the outs of the market. So the whole system, to me, is just atrocious. The whole system. And I don't really know how to correct it. I mean, I think the Department of Education has got to go by the wayside. That's step one. We got to get rid of the Department of Education completely. That program came, I think, was in the 80s. And if you look at the numbers, we've gotten worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse each year that this Department of Education was a thing. So if you're not helping, what's the point? Why are we keep endorsing this? Why do we keep funding this? If this thing is not helping us like it was supposed to, like it was designed to, what's the point of keeping it around? And it doesn't make sense to me. It makes no sense. Um, it's a big issue because in my heart of hearts, I truly believe like that our kids, these kids, or these future generations, this is the future of our country. This is the future of the world. And how are we shaping them? How are we raising them? How are we educating them? These things are massively, massively, massively important. You know, we see the things going on now. That's complete chaos. Complete chaos. You got people that are literally standing in the street trying to solve problems. Like, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't care what side of the fence you're on, standing in the middle of a road is the last place you need to be solving any kind of problem. But we live in a time where that you're seeing that every single day now. That's happening over and over and over, where people are just standing in front of a vehicle or they're using their own vehicle as a weapon. And it's like, what are we doing? Right? So our kids that we're raising right now can be our saving grace. So when we're 50 and 60 and 70 and these kids start getting in these leadership roles and become elected officials, we have groomed them. We're like, man, we can get a breath of fresh air at the end here. If we all survive whatever's coming in the future, if we can make it to that point, maybe these kids can kind of give us a breath of fresh air there at the end as they take over the world. But the road that we're on and with this public education system, yeah, that's not going to happen. Okay, we're not giving these kids an arsenal to go work with in the real world at all, and that it breaks my heart. You know, when I read stuff like that, it breaks my heart just as much as it makes me mad. Because to me, you know, I was fortunate enough that, you know, growing up, this is just me personally. You know, I didn't really have teachers that pushed anything like that. I know of teachers in the school system that I came from that were kind of that way. Not they didn't do these types of things, but I wouldn't put it past them, is what I'm saying. But you know, I was very, very, very fortunate. You know, I don't sit here disgruntled because of my personal experience going through a public education system outside of the curriculum that was taught. You know, but I didn't really have a teacher cross the line in any way, shape, or form. I didn't have a teacher try to push a certain agenda on me in any way, shape, or form. So, you know, I'm not speaking out of just, you know, I was screwed over growing up, and no, that's not where I'm coming from. Where I'm coming from is, as I gotten older, I've learned and learned and read and talked to a lot of people to understand this is a massive problem we have nationwide. This isn't a specific state, city size. It doesn't matter. Okay. So I just wanted to kind of get that off of my chest. I think it's extremely sad that this is where we are. And again, I hope all people involved, if these things are true, because right now I think they're allegations. But if these things come out to be true in any way, shape, or form, like I said, these people need to be held to the fullest extent of the law. This is complete garbage. They have no business being in any school, teaching any kids anything. Everything that work at the, I'm not going to go there. So, you know, because we don't need to be pushing those agendas. You know, I would be so proud if somebody asked my son, I don't know what he would say. I haven't asked him, but I'm just saying, if somebody said, hey, who's your biggest idol? If he said something like Jesus Christ, that would make me so proud. It would make me proud because, you know, my goal is I want him to have a relationship with Christ and learn things that it took me 30 some years and he can do it now. But if he were to say that and then get scolded for that in front of everybody and told no, because that's a religious figure, I would have a massive problem with that. I just would. And so yeah, those people have no business being in any type of school setting. I have no respect for any of those people at all. That's garbage. So let's be better. We've got to be better as educators. We have to be better as a society, as parents, collectively. We've just got to do better for our kids, for the sake of our kids. Okay, we've got to do better for these little human beings that are relying on us, that are counting on us and we're failing them miserably. As a whole, not everybody. I'm not talking to everybody, but as a whole, we are failing them miserably. And it's just tremendously sad. It doesn't need to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. We live in such a time where we have all these great things like technology at our fingertips that could really, really help and improve how we're doing things and the processes that we have to follow to complete things, and we don't even use it in the right way. It's like, you've got to be kidding me. So, I pray for a day that, we don't have this school system that's just so flawed and so up and down and pushing these agendas. And, you know, there were schools, I don't know if it's still going on, but I mean, it's just another example. I mean, they had kids identifying as cats, and so they put litter boxes in the bathroom. You weren't allowed to make fun of or say something or whatever because they identified as cats. Like, what are we doing? I could just go on and on about the things that are actually going on in schools. And some of the stuff that you hear about, you read about, or somebody tells you about, and then you go fact check. You're like, this sounds made up. This sounds like some kind of comedy show, or like, it just doesn't seem real. And you go find out that it's true. Like the litter box thing, like that's a true thing. Like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, that sounds like something that somebody just made up or was trying to be extreme. Like on the SNAP thing, people are saying they're going to boycott water, which that's a completely false narrative. It's made up. It's an extreme thing. Like, you would think it's something along those lines. Then you find out it's actually true. It's like, what are we doing? Like, come on. Like, you've got to be kidding me. Litter box? I'm not even getting into that, guys. That's a whole other rabbit hole. But it falls in the same line of public education wronging our kids. That's what it falls. It falls underneath that same umbrella. It's a big umbrella. There's a lot of things underneath that umbrella, and it just doesn't have to be that way. That's where I get hung up. Like, it does not have to be. We are making it that way. We are causing it to be that way. It's tremendously sad. It truly is, and I hope and pray that we can see a day. I know it's not going to be anytime soon. Maybe towards the end of my life, we can get some things corrected and be, oh wow, this is our school system is a top-notch school system as a country, and it's taught based on facts, not opinions. This is how you do it, X, Y, Z, keep it moving. This is how you do this, X, Y, Z, keep it moving. Like, just teach them what they need to know. Yeah, I pray and long for those days. So, all right, I feel better. But take care, you guys. That's the end of today's episode. That's all I had. I come in here and just ramble on. But I'm very passionate about this type of stuff, and I think you guys can pick that up. So, but anyways, carry on about your day. You can go find that article, ACLS. If you type that, ACLS.com, it's on their website. I can't remember, it was like American Center of Law and something. I can't remember exactly what it stands for. But the article is posted there. I do believe now this is going at least statewide, because I think another news station back in Kansas posted it that was nowhere near Eureka. So I do think it's kind of starting to circulate. I hope this thing gets national news. This is garbage. I hope they get national news. They get put in the spotlight, and they're forced to answer some questions. Some people are forced out of the building and never allowed back. I hope these type of things happen. And I still hope after they're kicked out, they have to go to court and face, like you did the crime, you do the time type situation. So anyways, take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Be strategic. God bless.